When you know the many fighting principles of chess, going over grandmaster games can be very instructive. And this game between Magnus Carlsen and Alireza Firouzja is a prime example. Magnus opens with d4. We have knight to f6, c4, e6, opening up the bishop, knight to f3, d5. There are many possible moves in the opening that are all valid. Develop, castle. Knight to c3. Bishop pins the knight. And in all chess games, you have to figure out where you're going to place your bishops. And Magnus makes that decision by taking the pawn. Pawn takes, and bishop goes to f4. Castles, e3. Bishop develops. Queen to b3. And this is very interesting to me. You know, one of the issues is how much calculation is being done and the idea of luring your opponent. Is it by chance or by design? Every metaphysical question is played out on the chessboard. Knight defends the bishop. And now the knight attacks the bishop on f5, right? Getting bishops for knights, getting the bishop pair is usually advantageous. But is that the real reason that Magnus played the knight out? Now the bishop retreats because he doesn't really want to give up the bishop. And so now the white bishop, the light-squared bishop, goes to d3. Now he's got this better diagonal, this more active diagonal, which may have been the reason for the knight going out to h4. Pawn advances, defending the bishop. Possible attacks on the queen. Castles. And now the knight goes after the dark-squared bishop for the same reasons. Bishop pair. He would prefer to give up the bishop there instead of having the pawns doubled and weakening this pawn. And he takes it. Pawn takes. And now the bishop slides back with a threat, right? Every move a threat, either tactical or strategic. He's threatening to win a pawn here at least. The knight swings back. Knight slides in, attacking the bishop. And the bishop, he doesn't want to give up the bishop. He could have defended it, but he backed it off. And now c5, hitting the center, right? You want to break up the center. And now there's also a potential threat here. Power move number 2, attacking the queen. And getting a queenside pawn majority, right? Which is one of the main strategic goals, strategic imbalances in chess. And my question to Magnus would have been, did he calculate this? Was he luring his opponent into playing c4, attacking the queen? Chase the knight out, right? Get men out of, Karpov says, get men out of enemy territory, all else being equal. So he beats him to the punch with an in-between move, attacking the queen. Queen runs, and now the knight swings out. Now the knight is on the wing, right? And not very effective there. And now immediately, this is the interesting thing. This is why I have this question. You know, you can allow some pawn advances as long as you can chip away at them. And the B pawn is able to do that. So he immediately goes after that pawn base with his B pawn. And now the knight goes to a better square, right? So he's lost the tempo in this. Take, take. And now we still have a queenside pawn majority. I have 3 against 1 actually over here, which is really interesting how Magnus handles this. And I really wonder how deeply he calculated it. Now the pawn advances, right? Preventing b5. Yeah? And now this pawn is temporarily weak. So, and he works on it. Queen defends. Queen takes. 2 against 1 on this pawn now. And now Ali has to figure out how to save the pawn or use that passed pawn to convert that to another advantage if he can. Knight attacks the queen. Queen slides over. Rook defends. Passed pawns must be pushed. Knight slides over. Rook up. And we have an attack on the rook. Rook slides back. Knight goes back. So this is a question. This is asking for a draw here. If Magnus repeats the position, Ali might have gone for the draw with the black pieces, but Magnus wants to win this game. Now he's got 3 against that pawn. The knight, the bishop, and the rook. Pawn advances. He could give up that pawn. Let's see, are there tricks here? I guess if he takes the pawn with the rook, well, let's just play it out. All right, he takes the pawn. Aha. Wow, this is a clever tactic. He has this fork. So he would be forced to take. Rook takes. He gives up a piece, though, right? 3 against... No, he doesn't even give up a piece, right? It's 3 against 3. Oh, wow. That was clever. So anyway, Magnus doesn't fall for that. I may have fallen for that. Knight slides in. Queen over. Oh, yeah. Back up here a second. Nope. Okay, go back. Queen over, and we pin the knight. Bishop x-rays the rook on b1. 2 attackers on the knight, 1 defender. But that knight is pinned on b4, so it's actually defended indirectly. And now bishop takes, knight. Ooh, knight can't take, it's pinned. And the pawn advances. He gives up the pawn now. And I don't think he got much out of this, did he? And the bishop slides back. Now he still has the 2 against 1. That's his strength. And white has a passed pawn. Queen to d5, attacking the rook and the bishop. The rook's defended. The bishop runs, prepares to f3, more active square. And now we have this is the thing. You know, we've got this passed pawn. Magnus has the passed pawn. And black has potential passed pawn on the queen side. And the issue is how you're going to deal with these strengths, actually. And the already passed pawn is the greatest strength on the board right now. And how Magnus is going to convert that in some very interesting ways, which we shall see. Queen slides back, knight up, rook over, get the open file. And also to get out of the attack of the queen. You know, the queen is attacking the rook on b3, but the open file is very important. b6, bishop slides back. And now there's a lot of, cat and mouse play, right? They've got the clock to deal with. And Magnus needs to figure out how to capitalize on this passed pawn. Not easy to do. Queen over. Rook slides back to defend the back rank weakness. And so that allows the queen to maneuver. g3, g6 rather. Bishop to b5, defending that. His weakness. Rook over. And now he takes. Okay, so you see white also has the bishop against knight in the endgame with pawns on both sides of the board, and that's another major strategic advantage. Now I love how this pans out here in the ending and how Magnus converts this. All right, king up, knight over, 2 attackers on the pawn, right? Going after weak pawns. That's the key. That's the big part of the middle game, every part of the game. Queen up, pawn slides over to h5, maybe open up the king side there. Beats him here with knight, with pawn to e4. Knight has to run. Queen wants to trade. White wants to trade. Why not, right? He's got the passed pawn. He's got the bishop. And Ali just keeps making some threats here. f4. Now you start advancing your pawn majority, right? It's very difficult to, you have to prepare. That's one of the key things in chess, right? Preparation for these advances. Otherwise, your opponent can swipe one of the pawns. Queen to e6, attacking the undefended pawn. Aha, so this is the beautiful part of the game. You know, Bobby Fischer always says you've got to give to get, right? And that's another way of saying attack by drawing, which was Bruce Lee's, one of his angles of attack. It's also the Greek gift, the Trojan horse. So this is really beautiful. So so here's the thing. He says he's putting a big question now to Ali. He's saying, you can have the pawn on e4, but I'll get the pawn on f7 with check. Which is better? So you have all these decisions to make. But we shall see. So he takes it. He goes for it. Because here's a nice lure, right? He wants to try and get these passed pawns. So he takes, Magnus takes with check. But it requires a lot of calculation. And you have the clock going. So, you know, the other thing is, you know, you can devote all of your resources to going for a draw or try and go for a win. And, you know, Ali Reza wants to go for a win here. If he had developed all of his resources well, actually, I'll take that back, because Magnus had a real tangible advantage with the passed pawns, which he can convert, and also with the bishop. So he has to try to go for a win, because he will end up losing if he plays passively. All right, so king up. We checked him. King up. Queen defends the pawn. Now he's got three possible checks, right? On f8 check, on h8 check, and on g5 check. So the king slides up partly for that reason, and also to ask white, what will you do? How will you convert this? He can't push that pawn just yet, right? He's got two attackers on the d5 square. And now Magnus again goes for the queen trade, which black avoids. And the king slides back. That's another lovely thing. I'm sure this was by design, right? Not by chance. So he could tuck his king away on h2 and then go for the final advance and attack. Queen to d2. Still trying to prevent that advance. King up. And now we're ready. There was the lure. That juicy pawn on d4. And now he goes for the final thrusts. Check. King up. Check. King up. And now that bishop that has been silent for such a long time, just defending the pawn on a4, slides to c4, threatening mate on g8. And it is here that Firouzja resigns. Whatever he tries will lead to mate, to a forced mate. The king can't move. Let's say if he advances this pawn, we can deliver a check. And if the king goes up, that is mate, for example. And whatever else he tries will lead to a forced mate. Hope you got something out of that, and I'll talk to you later.